What about the other animals there, the mice? I mean, do you care as much for the mice as you do for the monkeys?
Absolutely, absolutely.
They're just mice and rodents and fish, people will say, for goodness sake. So, you know, some people will draw a line and think, I find the idea of macaque monkeys being experimented on in that way extremely disturbing, but mice?
Yes, a mouse's life is just as important as a monkey's life and just as important as a person's life. I mean, they're doing
our
things...
last debate...
Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel. Hope you are feeling good. Today we'll be checking out a debate which Douglas Murray is one of the speakers. Title is It's Right to Experiment on Animals. Wow, I believe this is going to be interesting. Let's check it out. Go.
Well, in recent weeks, people have been taking to the streets here in Oxford to protest against the opening of a new biomedical research centre. Its scientists will be seeking cures for cancer, heart disease, strokes, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, diabetes, HIV, muscular dystrophy and motor neuron disease. Well, you can't argue with that. But there is a big argument about their laboratory methods, especially the use of fish, frogs, mice, ferret and indeed monkeys. Is it right to experiment on animals? Two animal rights protesters here, Amanda and Emma. Good morning to you.
Morning.
What are they doing to these monkeys?
They're doing quite horrific things to them. They're training them to do certain tasks by depriving them of food and water. They're starving them into submission, and the reward is to have the tops of their heads sliced off and electrodes forced into their brains. It's just horrendous what's happening to these animals.
What about the other animals there, the mice? I mean, do you care as much for the mice as you do for the monkeys?
Absolutely, absolutely.
They're just mice and rodents and fish, people will say, for goodness sake. So, you know, some people will draw a line and think, I find the idea of macaque monkeys being experimented on in that way extremely disturbing, but mice?
Yes, a mouse's life is just as important as a monkey's life and just as important as a person's life. I mean, they're doing
our
things...
last debate, do you equate it with the horrors that we've been hearing about there in wars? I mean, do you think it's as... I know you feel passionately about this, but do you think it's as relevant and as important?
Suffering is suffering. Yeah. I mean, they are doing things to animals in laboratories that would be considered torture if it was done to people. And yet we know animals feel pain. We know that they suffer both physically and psychologically. And the reason that experimenters give for why we should be allowed to do this is because they say animals are worth less than people. Well, I'm sorry, but that's the same kind of ridiculous claim that the Nazis made when they experimented on those they'd imprisoned inside concentration camps. They said it's because they were worth less than they were. And it's the same kind of claim that white people made when they enslaved black people. They said it was okay because they're worth less than we are. But I'm sorry, that is not a reason.
No.
That is an excuse for exploitation.
We're just
and
getting
abuse.
context from you, but what if somebody were to say to a relative of yours, a loved one, look, Herceptin will save your life, or you indeed, and Herceptin was, incontrovertibly, it was tested on animals. Would you accept that drug? Would you be happy about your nearest and dearest having that drug, Emma? Yes or no? To save their life?
I mean, the problem is that all drugs have been tested on animals, and I don't have a choice. You know, if there was a choice between a drug that had or hadn't.
You just want to stop the testing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but it is not right to expect a sentient being that can suffer.
And it's torture, that's the word you use.
It is torture,
it's torture.
absolutely.
Dr. Simon Festing, it's torture.
Well, medical research is about compassion for people and, of course, animals, because they benefit from medical research, animal research as well. All the veterinary medicines were developed in animals. The point is that use of animals is a small but vital part of medical research to develop new cures and treatments.
Is it vital?
Yes, it is vital. It's a small, but nonetheless vital, because you cannot do it in the alternatives. You can't study a beating heart in a test tube. Let's just talk about
we hear
the
about
example.
what they're doing to those monkeys, for example. So let's talk about that.
Yes, let's talk about that. The surgeon at Oxford University operates on 200 patients each year for Parkinson's disease. He slices off the top of their heads and he inserts electrodes into their brains, exactly as he does to the 2 monkeys that he uses every year for research. It's the same operation, but he applies the results of that research directly to improve the operation he does in his patients. It's a life-saving operation for Parkinson's disease.
These monkeys are isolated
That's
in
not
cages.
true.
Yes, they are.
No, they're housed together in groups. They're extremely well looked after, and they are given. You would not wish to mistreat them because you wouldn't get good results from your surgery. It's the same operation that he does in the patients that he does on the monkeys.
But the patient understands what's going to happen.
Exactly.
To them, don't they? Whereas the animal is just saying, doesn't know why you're doing that. You're just being randomly cruel to it. And animals, I think animals have souls. And you know, maybe we benefit from that sort of research, right? You might have a good argument for that. But the fact that higher animals, especially monkeys and dogs and cats, do have some sort of soul, some sort of consciousness there, and do suffer when you sort of inflict these sort of treatments on them.
Macaques are our cousins, aren't they?
Yes, that's right.
That is
exactly
immoral.
Why that they are used. As you say, I mean, using this kind of surgery on monkeys, this is less than 1 in 10,000 of animal research projects. It's a tiny, tiny part, but it is nonetheless very important.
Well, is it important, Andrew Monash? I mean, if it wasn't important, they wouldn't be doing it. I'm sure they don't enjoy doing it.
Okay, well, animal experimentation is bad science. The jury is still out on whether deep brain stimulation in people is causing more good than harm, or vice versa. The research that
It's completely untrue.
there is 50 miles away from here, there are researchers doing non-invasive scanning on human volunteers, and they are getting equivalent data. They don't have to do these experiments on monkeys.
Andre, that is completely untrue. The world's leading medical experts, and this has just been in a published paper in Nature, have said that this fMRI scanning that you're talking about does not give the same results, and that you cannot replicate the studies that you do in animals with scanning. It's a completely different technique that just measures the blood flow in the brain. Now, of course, nobody would wish to use alternatives if it could be avoided. Nobody wants to use animals. I mean, of course we recognise all the ethical concerns. We would much
But isn't there
rather...
a commercial imperative too?
Not at all, no. Most research... No, animal use is very expensive and it's very time-consuming. So we are investing hundreds of millions of pounds in the alternative, in scanning, in microdosing, in these advanced mechanisms, cell cultures, computer simulations. Now we've got it to the stage where animal research is only a small part of medical research.
But still a vital one, as you said earlier. OK, let's take it to the panel. I mean, Esther Ranson, do you not find this repulsive?
No, absolutely I do not find this at all repulsive. Thank heavens that the Americans were able to look at the results of thalidomide use on pregnant rabbits, saw that it produced terrible deformities in baby rabbits, and saved the American public from what we went through in this country. I'm listening to... I'm listening to the logical, carefully thought through argument by a man who does not appear to me to be a psychopath or a sadist, and I don't
But you never know.
And I don't believe that scientists who work with animals don't care about them, don't suffer with them, and don't wish to find other methods. But I'm hearing in you a very powerful emotional argument, and I just wonder whether you've actually been to research laboratories, walked with scientists like that doctor, heard about the work that they're doing and seen the precautions they take.
Herceptin, polio vaccine, insulin, I mean, they've all been tested on animals, haven't they?
Of course, they've all been tested on animals, but at the same time, there was clinical research going on at the same time. If you want to take polio as an example, the researchers who discovered the cell culture to produce polio vaccine, Enders, Robbins and Weller, they received the Nobel Prize in 1954. They couldn't get it right in monkeys. They tried, in desperation, human cell culture, and it worked. We have today the possibility
so
to
you're saying
produce
it's been bad science
vaccines.
for a long time. It's been an inexact science.
Why this obsession, even today, to grow human vaccines in monkey cells? Why still today this obsession?
Peter Hitchens, do you worry about a mouse in this context?
I'm sorry, I'm hopeless about this. I use humane mouse traps, and I do. And I think that most of us who think about animals and who have begun to have a slightly less wonderful impression of how valuable we are as life goes on, do think that there is a disproportion sometimes in our willingness to practice things on animals and to test things on animals so that we can be cured of diseases which in many cases we brought on ourselves.
We're here.
I think that the animal processes perform a very valuable function in making sure that we don't go too far. But I think that a total ban would be absurd, because I think the scientists who argue for experimentation also have a serious case. But I think they'd accept that they're more restrained now than they would have been 20 or 30 years ago, precisely because the protesters have touched their consciences. I think that's a good thing.
We've always recognised the ethical debate, and we know that people have concerns. I'm more than happy to get you into a research centre and explain to you.
And wire him up.
Strictest. You can have a go if you want. Yeah,
thanks.
But do you know, it's easier to get permission to do research on humans than it is on animals. We have the most comprehensive laws anywhere in the world. In the UK, you have to get 3 government licences. You have to prove there's no alternative. You have to demonstrate that you're looking after the animals as well as you can.
Would you volunteer to be researched on in the stead of some of these animals to save them?
I mean, if I had a disease, I would certainly be.
Have you ever been into a laboratory with perhaps
They
someone?
do not let people into these
Would you
places.
let those ladies in to have a look at the way you work?
We will not let anyone in who we think will do criminal activity.
You must behave yourselves when you're there.
We will let in. I can get in most of these people without any trouble, but they refuse to come in. We've invited them, and they come to the front door, and then they say, "No, we don't want to see you."
We've never been invited inside.
Do you have a cat, don't you, or a dog? Dogs, yeah?
Dog, yeah.
And you worm your dog.
Yeah.
So inevitably the worms are killed. That's for the health of your dog. Is there not a bigger story here, that animals are dying for the health of human beings? And it's exactly the same, isn't it? Exactly the same relationship between your dog and those worms.
No, not at all, because
we're
we're talking about animals who are being tortured.
Well, those worms aren't having a great time, right?
You know, we're talking about animals who are being treated as merely property.
You're
just disregarding the life. I'm really not trying to be facetious, because some people believe in the sanctity of all life, and you're just disregarding the lives of those worms. You're exterminating those worms.
Yeah, but it has to be done for the good of the animals.
For the good of the animals.
Because we're talking with animal experimentation, we're talking about causing immense animal suffering. We're talking about millions and millions
We've
of animals
debated this so many times, Amanda.
and
All she
dying
ever
on the
does is
bottom
she
of
says,
cage
"Oh, it's
floors."
who goes
Don't
into
tell me you're
work?
all friends.
Who goes into work? Yeah. Who goes into work every day to torture fish? I mean, it's just nonsense. You look at absolutely. Look, I went to a research. I went to a research lab the other day where they were testing to see why there are no fish coming back, why the eels are dying out. They were using very low doses of pollutants to test that were just affecting whether the reproductive rates on the fish. This is about conservation. This is about protecting wildlife and
You've
animals.
cleaned your act up, right, to some extent, and you've done the PR.
Well, they've had to, because the laws changed. That's the point.
Because of the people like them, you've had to sort of
because you
tighten
have
up.
a
Everybody knows how
fixed
cruel it
opinion.
was in the past. It's on film, it's on record.
We want to look
They always
after the
deny this
animals
thing
as
goes
well
on,
as
and
we
then you
can.
see it.
Let me tell you, what does this lady want? Because there's a big issue, of course, here in Oxford because of the new laboratory. What do you think?
Well, I think it's a highly emotional and highly controversial topic. And I think for the first time, I find myself sitting on the fence. I believe in the sanctity of all life.
Yes.
And wouldn't want to see wanton cruelty or ill treatment of animals in captivity. But at the same time, I go along with the idea that if there are carefully controlled, humane and ethical and necessary experiments that work towards the creation of drugs or improvement in drugs for healing people with life-threatening diseases,
proper controls.
then proper controls, I would go along with it.
Yes, and with the red jacket, yeah.
It's been really unfortunate with this issue for so long that it's become so polarised that, you know, people tend to... It's shut down a lot of debate how extreme a lot of the animal rights movement has been, particularly in Oxford. I mean, if you live here, you joke that we're all friends. Everybody knows everybody in Oxford. It's very small place. And that there is this real concern about being seen with the animal rights movements because it's become... Often a small minority has been so extreme and animal testers have been seen as these evil, awful people. And it shuts down the debate and it really concerns me. And I hate the thought of animal testing, I do. I hate it. I understand, I have a nursing background, I understand that at the moment it's necessary. But I think public opinion is moving further and further away from animal testing, and I would like to see more resources put in that way. And I know my generation would probably be out there waving the placards en masse if it wasn't for the fact that it was seen as such an extreme issue.
Even fish?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the direction of travel, and I think there needs to be more resources put into this area to find alternatives rather than attacking the people doing the testing.
Zoe,
there needs to be that understanding. We need an alternative.
Zoe, I wonder, is it a credible position to be against animal testing yet to eat meat?
Well, yeah, no, that's not credible at all. But I think as a society we've got to accept that we do value an animal's life worth as less than a human's. I think that just is, you have to take that as given, otherwise we wouldn't eat meat. So, you know...
Do you not admire the passion of
I do admire it very much, and I think history might yet prove us wrong. You know, in 100 years' time we might look at the way we've treated animals
like slavery,
as a kind of like slavery, as an incredible kind of violation. But I think in the meantime, while we do kind of put ourselves at a premium, then we've just got to put the accent on avoiding cruelty, and I think you can do that. You know, I don't think it's impossible.
You have your doubts, Amanda.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know that the animals suffer inside the laboratories. You know, you can't have...
I mean, this is done with pain relief, is it not?
2/3 of the experiments carried out in this country are done without any anaesthetic at all.
True? That's because it's so mild that to give an anaesthetic would be worse than the actual research itself. Talking about studies here, for example, change in diet, taking blood samples. There's one where you test for a medicine to see if it's drowsy, and you just warm up the plate underneath a rat's tail and it flicks its tail up. Now, why would you give an anaesthetic for that? These animals are well looked after.
But they could have saved.
Want to get good
and
results,
Richard here,
and they can save lives.
They've saved your life, you believe, because you're in remission at the moment from cancer.
That's right.
And looking extremely well.
Thank you.
So thank you for taking the time to come on the programme this morning. And you've taken drugs which were clearly tested on animals.
Yes, I have. I mean, for me, you see, I'm a consumer, if you like, of everything that's being talked about here this morning. And when you are diagnosed with cancer, and when you're told that this cancer is aggressive and fast-acting, and you're offered a course of treatment, which if you were in a position to actually think clearly enough to think about its history, its research history, it just simply does not occur to you to ask about the provenance of the medicine. The point is, you have a responsibility to yourself as an ill person to seek any form of treatment that can get you better. You have a responsibility to your family, and I think the last thing on one's mind, and I'm sure I speak for people who are not just cancer patients, but for people with all sorts of conditions, the last thing on your mind is to wonder about the ethical production of the medicine that you're given.
You just want to get well.
Wants to get well.
Exactly. You have had the last word on this, and we wish you well. Thank you very much indeed.
Wow. What an interesting debate. You can tell this was really, really heated. Just by the title, is it right to experiment on animal? And I believe every one of the speakers has given a reasonable point, has given a reasonable fact. But what annoys me the most is the point that the lady that is, against the motion, is the point that she raised that a mouse life is just as important as a human life. How will you compare a mouse life to a human life? I feel that is totally unacceptable. You can't compare a mouse life or a reptile life to the life of a human. I don't think that is right. And if you are arguing from a very strong point, from a very credible point, and you believe animals should not be experimented in order to be able to produce drugs that can be life-saving. If you are against that, I think you shouldn't eat fish, you shouldn't eat meat, you shouldn't eat animal. You can't say it's wrong to experiment on animal, and you forgot that you are also engaging in torturing animal by eating fish, by eating meat. If we are going to continue like this, I believe that means everyone is going to be a vegetarian. So there will be no eating of meat, there will be no eating of fish, no eating of pork. Everyone is just going to restrain themselves into eating leaves. you know, everyone is going to train themselves into becoming a vegetarian, eating vegetables, eating leaf. I don't think that's what we want. So if we are going to say we don't want to torture animals, and we are going to say the life of a mouse is as important as the life of human, that means no one is going to eat meat, no one is going to eat fish, everyone is going to just eat leaf. And I don't think that is what we want. So I believe, just like the doctor have stated as fact, I've stated a point that even before they experiment on animal, that the documentation they have to get, that it's even very difficult for them to get that documentation. And there are a lot of things they have to do, and at the same time they have to spend their time in, you know, in grooming this animal, spend their time, spend their money, investing their money in taking care of this animal in order for them to be able to get the results they want. I don't believe they will be willing to torture the animal, because they know when they torture the animal, they won't get the results they want. So I don't believe they will do something like that. And I believe if a policy is set in place whereby before anyone experiments on animal, is going to take due process to make sure that the animals are not going to be tortured in certain manners, I believe if those policies are set in place, I don't see anything bad in experimenting on animals, because I believe it's life-saving. Because at the end of the day, they end up producing drugs that, you know, can cure a lot of illness, and even those that is against the motion that animals should not be experimented. Most of the drugs they take, most of the drugs they consume, most of the drugs their family consume, most of the drugs their friends consume, these drugs were actually gotten from the results gotten in experimenting on animals. So you coming to support the motion that animals should not be experimented on, that they are going through torture, I feel that you are an hypocrite to say something like that. Because for the fact that you are eating meat, you are eating fish, and you are saying animals are going through torture because they have been experimented on to produce a life-saving drugs, I feel you are an hypocrite. So I've really learned a lot just listening to every one of the speaker, and I really relate to them. I relate with the doctor, and I support the point he has given. I support the fact he has given, and I believe if policies are set in place in order to make sure that these animals that are being experimented on are not going to be tortured, I believe I see nothing wrong in experimenting on animals, because it's life-saving at the end of the day. Based on the results they got from experimenting on the animals, they are going to produce drugs, and those drugs are going to be consumed by humans. So I don't see anything bad in it. If they're even operating animals in order to be able to become more perfect when they are operating humans, I don't see anything wrong in it. But I believe a policy should be set in place in order to be able to regulate the type of experiments that will be done. I believe if a policy is set in place, I don't see anything wrong. So I would also like to hear your comments. What do you think about the topic of this debate? Is it right to experiment on animal? And if you believe it's wrong to experiment on animal, I believe you must be a vegetarian. That means consuming fish, consuming meat. That means you are also torturing the animal by consuming the animal. Let's not forget about that. So keep the comments coming. Let's get the conversation rolling. Don't forget, click on the subscribe button, click on the like button. Do have a nice day.
Yeah.